Good morning, everybody, and welcome. If you are looking for the monthly meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council, you're in the right place. We'll give a little more time for people to enter our virtual room and get the meeting started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you. Let's get things underway. Again, good morning. It is February 7th, 2025, a Friday, and this is the monthly meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. Welcome to everybody online. First item of agenda is the roll call. So if we could have that now, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. For the record, Councilmember DeFontorum and Councilmember Lee have been excused from today's meeting. Councilmember Farrell.
Present.
Chair Hall.
Present.
Councilmember Mena.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Harris. She is here. I know she's here. I saw her.
Okay.
So I see Councilmember Harris as present, but
Yes.
perhaps has momentarily stepped away from
Okay.
her
Correct.
computer.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on, Councilmember Meehan.
Here.
And Councilmember Willard.
Present.
Thank you. We have quorum today, Chair Hall.
Wonderful. And next we move to our review and follow-up on action items.
Thank you. One moment. Let me transition over.
Sure.
We have 5 updates for everyone today. First update regarding down payment assistance and rules tied to OHCS lending. There was a request to see a forgivable loan option for DPA under the approved DPA rules tied to OHCS home ownership lending. Currently, the Homeownership Division is presenting a forgivable option and related topics in today's meeting. Regarding LIHTC and ORCA update, there was an ask to create talking points centered around what it actually costs to build an affordable rental housing system. The update is that ARH expects to have a report on this for March's Housing Stability Council meeting. Regarding the LIFT program framework, there was an ask to see more outreach to rural communities that are underserved. The update on this is there's been no change from January's update. They are engaging with the division to improve their outreach efforts to rural underserved communities and plan on meeting with stakeholders to develop a system that could track and record our efforts and anticipate having this in place by the second quarter of 2025. Regarding LIFT program framework and OAHTC expansion for home ownership, there was a question if there was a way to have some consistency with the affordable rental housing, specifically with the equity shared model. The update is there's been no change since the January update. Homeownership is developing a team of staff to work closely with ARH to ensure more consistency. We are also exploring if any other shared equity models have been developed and share the lessons learned. We expect the work will be completed in the second quarter of 2025. Regarding ORCA and regarding the readiness criteria, there seems to be instances where projects are being held up because some are ready on paper, but others are ready to build right now. Is there any data on how many of these instances are out there? The update is that Natasha will speak to this in her update today and intends to bring additional information as part of regular updates to the Housing Stability Council. That concludes the updates.
Thanks very much. Any comments or feedback from council or staff? Councilmember Mania.
Thank you, Chair Hall. My only comment is that greatly appreciate the follow-up, because sometimes we ask for things and forget. So having this reminds us as to what we're looking at. So thank you very much.
All right, now it is time for the report of the chair. And I want to again say good morning to you all. First off, I'd like to highlight quickly a couple of items on our agenda that just personally I'm really pleased to see. The Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program looks like it's going to help us address in a significant way what we in the housing arena call the missing middle. You know, as I talk about housing in various public forums in my community, people applaud the hundreds of new apartment homes we've added in the last few years, but often somebody will say, well, what about home ownership? I'm glad I'll be able to tell them about this, and I've already reached out to some of my local developers. We'll lead an effort to put together a fund request from Lincoln County. I also really appreciate the tribal government-to-government report. You know, I've been told that our county relationship with our local tribal government, the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz, is uncommon because it's a uniquely positive one. And the tribe has been an active partner with us on many things. And I'm really pleased that the vital role of tribal governments has received this recognition by state leadership. I want to add one more thing. Although the world may feel like a chaotic and confusing space right now, and even though we don't know what our landscape might look like in 6 months or a year, the work continues. Change may be coming, but our core values have not and will not change. Meanwhile, the work continues. The work of helping our fellow Oregonians obtain shelter and help in achieving happy, productive lives will always continue. Our work to support community-driven solutions will always continue. Always. Director Bell, time for your report.
Yeah, well, always indeed, Chair Hall. Well, good morning, members of the council. It's really good to see you, really good to be in virtual community on Friday. I certainly want to echo all of the comments from our chair and council member Mena. It's helpful to get the feedback on the process each time we try something new. We want to make sure that it is living up to the council's expectations. So we'll continue to remain open to feedback on that. And then again, want to reaffirm all of Chair Hall's comments, and particularly that our work continues unabated to ensure that we're advancing progress, housing progress that includes and works for everybody. So our work continues and our agenda is a testament to that. I'm going to defer my time this morning for the director's update to our colleagues from government relations. As the council knows, on January 21st, I believe the 83rd Oregon Legislative Assembly convened. So we are in full swing for the 2025 legislative session. I fully hope and expect for this to be a productive and vibrant session in terms of being able to facilitate a future that makes housing progress real, and that we can continue on that pathway in a place that works for everybody, but also recognizing that it is a matter that keeps a lot of folks up at night. So consistent with what we've previously committed to making sure that the council is getting the necessary updates with session, we'll have government relations give an update. And then Chair Hall, I will yield to you and to the council, even whether if it's now in this meeting or post this meeting, to give some feedback about what might be helpful about regularity of updates. Otherwise, we'll just make sure that they are given on a regular cadence. So with that, I will yield and turn it over to government relations folks. I believe Tanisha Rosas and Jill Gray are present.
We are. Thank you, Director Bell. My name is Jill Gray. I'm the Assistant Director of Government Relations for OHCS, and I'm joined by my colleague on the Government Relations team, Tanisha. And Tanisha, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Tanisha Rosas. I am the Senior Legislative Coordinator for the Government Relations team, and I'm primarily focused on local governments and affordable rental housing.
Thank you. And as Director Bell said, we are happy to come back every month and do an update about session. And in fact, it would be really wonderful if in the next meeting or a future meeting, if we could bring the whole team so that you can see the people who are representing the agency over at the legislature. But for today, we'll give a short update about some of the items that are going on over at the legislature because we have some progress to share with you. Even though we are only in the third week of session, we just this week had public hearings on 2 of the bills that OHCS asked to be introduced this session. And I'm not doing very well copy pasting the link to the bill into the chat, but we will make sure to get you a link to both bills. The first bill is House Bill 3034. And again, this is a bill that we asked to be introduced. The bill has to do with the emergency housing account. The department is the administrator of the emergency housing account, but that isn't quite clear in statute. We asked for clarity in statute to make it very clear that OHCS is the administrator of the emergency housing account. This bill does not change any allocations from the emergency housing account, nor does it change any of the monies that are deposited into the emergency housing account. It is really a clarity issue that we're asking for to make it very clear that the department is the administrator of the emergency housing account. And again, that bill is House Bill 3034. We'll get you a link into chat here so you can read it for yourselves. It had a public hearing on Wednesday, which is the first step in trying to get this bill passed. The next step is to have a work session scheduled. That work session has not been scheduled yet, but the government relations team is working with the chair of the committee to get it scheduled for a work session. And we are happy to continue updating this council and everyone about that bill. The second bill is House Bill 3035. 3035 is really codifying flex lending in statute. And I know we have some people here from the homeownership division who are probably much more skilled at talking about this bill than I am. But House Bill 3035 is really, we have 2 different types of lending products at OHCS. We have one that is financed by bonds and one that is financed by the TBA market. That is called the Flex Lending Program. And Flex Lending is not in statute. It is an issue that our State Department of Justice and others have pointed out to us that it is a risk not to have it codified in statute. House Bill 3035 is really the vehicle that's doing that. It is codifying flex lending in statute. That bill also had a public hearing this week in the House Housing and Homelessness Committee. And it also does not have a work session scheduled yet, but we are actively working with the chair to try and get a work session for that one too. Those are 2 bills that OHCS asked to be introduced that have had their hearings. So they have already achieved the first step in the legislative process, and we're working to continue shepherding both of those through the session. And I might just pause here for a moment and to see if there are any questions about either bill.
Any questions, council? Well, if not, I guess we can continue moving along.
Perfect. The next bill that we're going to talk about is a bill that we have been working on here at OHCS, and the governor has introduced it as one of her priority bills. It is House Bill 2139. This bill is creating a tribal housing grant fund that OHCS would administer. I think everybody on council knows that there is currently a program at OHCS called BAFI NATO, the By and For Initiative for Native American Tribes of Oregon. But BAFI NATO has some limitations to it. And one of the consistent comments that we have received from tribal community members is the need to have a more flexible funding source so that they can determine their housing priority needs and use those funds for the priority needs they identify themselves. So House Bill 2139 is doing that. It is creating a tribal housing grant fund that would be then funded by the legislature. And those funds would be very flexible for tribal communities to use for the priority needs they have identified that could be anywhere along the housing spectrum of services, all the way from homelessness response to affordable rental housing to homeownership, whatever they determine is the priority need for them. That bill has a hearing on Monday, and Director Bell will be there to introduce the bill and explain it to the committee. So that bill is starting its first step in the legislative process. And then, so those are the updates we have about the bills that OHCS is working on. As a very, very brief highlight for the session, I would say that for Tanisha's and my experience and everybody on the government relations team, it is exactly what Chair Hall described, that there is a lot of uncertainty and even a little bit of chaos over there, but that the work continues. And for the government relations team, we are over there trying to make sure that legislators who have lots of ideas for housing and homelessness, that we are providing them the best information we can so that they can make the best decisions they can. Tanisha, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to talk about in particular for affordable rental housing, but I'll pause and just turn it over to you for a moment.
Yeah, I'll just highlight the last bill that the agency itself is carrying, and that's going to be House Bill 3036. And this would expand the Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credit to be able to be utilized not just for rent buy downs, but also for services. So we're excited to see that one. There's a lot of conversations around the tax credit in general. And so we're right on time amidst all those conversations, and the chair is excited about the bill, so it will very likely get a hearing, and we'll update you as soon as it does. Thank you.
And I know that was a very brief update for this month. Again, we're happy to come back and give additional highlights as we really start moving into session and there's a lot of activity happening to keep the council updated. But Director Bell, Chair Hall, that is our brief update about session.
Wonderful. Thank you, team. I appreciate it. Chair Hall, I will yield to you to see if there were questions or curiosities from your end or the council.
Yeah. I will first start off by saying I really appreciate this report, and I think that it would be helpful to council members if we had a similar report on the progress of key legislation throughout the session. But let's see what the rest of the council thinks. Anybody have yay, nay thoughts on the frequency of these reports, or any questions about what we just heard? Councilmember Willard.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I echo everything that you just said. I appreciate Jill and Tanisha coming today and just keeping us updated as to what's happening, especially at this moment of time of uncertainty. So I would definitely appreciate to get a follow-up each month as to how things are going. I think it's super informative that we still remain informed as to what's happening on priorities for the department. So yes, I definitely appreciate that. Thank you both so much.
Right. Councilmember Rogers.
Hi, I just want to thank you, Chair Hall. I just want to also echo that I think it's helpful. It will help alleviate some anxiety that I'm feeling, and I think other members may be feeling as well, just to have an update to make sure there aren't any roadblocks. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you very much. At this point, we move to the presentation by the Affordable Rental Housing Team. And we've got 3 items on the agenda under transactions. And first off, we have a public hearing in accordance with ORS 456.561, specifically on these 3 transactions. And we have one person who signed up to offer testimony is Roman, and I'm sorry if I mangle your name, Skurdal, Roman Skurdal. Are you on the line?
Go ahead, Roman, you are on mute.
I honestly don't know how can you repeat that? I did not have anything to actually share on this at this moment.
Oh, okay. You said that you wanted to, you had comment on the Orchard Park Apartments when you signed up.
Got it. Apologies for that. I misread the prompt when I submitted that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Jalen Smith?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Give me 1 second. Let me grab my piece of paper.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oregon Housing and Community Service, in conjunction with Oregon Law Center, Public Partnerships, United Way, Vienna Star, have violated my rights under the Fair Housing Act. I am concerned with OHCS being the administrator of funding for the monies from the legislature and of funding from organizations like Public Partnerships. OHCS use their guidelines, which are not laws, to refuse to provide the same amount of rental assistance to a tenant facing eviction with an active court case and in need of future rent as they would pay for a tenant in need of arrears. For example, OHCS, in conjunction with Oregon Law Center, Eviction Defense, and Public Partnerships, paid $8,000 in arrears for me. That rental assistance was returned by the landlord, and I'll get to that part in a second. OHCS, the Oregon Law Center, Eviction Defense, and Public Partnerships should have supported me with rental assistance by providing that same $8,000 that was returned by the landlord to the court to support the appeal of the eviction. That would have been put into the court to fund the supersedious undertaking to stay the eviction pending the outcome of the appeal. Tenants who have been illegally evicted in violation of House Bill 2001 and appeal their evictions should receive funding from these organizations and not have Andrea Bell and others in OHCS claim their guidelines, which are not laws, force them to not support these tenants. This is part of the cycle of homelessness that you guys claim that you want to support, that you want to end.
Excuse me, but these comments are important, but they are not related to the 3 transactions we're talking about today. So I'm going to ask staff to follow up with you.
I don't want staff to follow up with me. I need to be able to speak about this right here and now. I don't have.
That's not allowed. I'm sorry. We have specific legal guidelines on what can and can't be presented during public hearings. So let's turn to the staff now, and Director Detweiler Dobby.
Good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, Housing Stability Council. This is Natasha Detweiler Davy, Director of Affordable Rental Housing here. And I will, let's see, first up, we have a few agenda items. I think you signaled, Chair Hall, and we're going to start with a few transactions on the 4% conduit side, and I will share screen and hand it off to Ty Dunson Strain.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, council members and Chair Hall, Director Bell. For the record, I'm Todd Unson-Serrano, AD of Transactions, and here to present a couple of projects that have been long in the making. And first starting off with Barber Apartments, sponsored by Innovative Housing. This is a great transformative project that it's 151 total units. And wanted to also make mention of our other legislative funding partners in this project, PHB and the Metro folks staff, and just wanted to make sure that folks are aware, that this is a collaborative funding effort with a lot of sources. With that, we have we're seeking approval. We have lift funds and conduit funds. The total project cost exceeds over 76 million, and includes a range of unit sizes and notably four bedrooms and 3 bedrooms are included in this project. It includes a large outdoor play areas, community laundry facilities, on-site resident services, washer dryers and units. And the project is slated to close this month. And next slide. And Innovative Housing has partnered with a host of culturally specific organizations to provide full comprehensive culturally specific services to the tenants who will be living in this complex, including Islamic Social Services of Oregon State, Black Parent Initiative, and IRCO, and they've also partnered with Neighbor House to include youth programming and senior services that are culturally responsive. The project sponsor in conjunction with their general contractor Todd Constructions is committed to meeting our MWSB goals, and they know what is expected of them. Also, just note in conjunction that the Metro folks will also be having monitoring from the MWSB side. With that, I can continue to the next project, which is Orchard Park. This project also includes a range of subsidies, and this is a fairly large 224 unit preservation projects, and Aberdeen Capital is collaborating with Salem Housing Authority. They've acquired the property and now and received preservation funds previously, and now they're coming back to seek conduits and 4% LIHTC to finish out much needed capital for the rehabilitation of the units. Next slide. Aberdeen Capital and Salem Housing Authority entered into an MOU and to provide culturally responsive services to the tenants who will be occupying these units. And there's also going to be a resident service coordinator assigned to this project. And Aberdeen Capital and LMC have committed to meeting our MWSB target goals for this project. And then continue on our last project that we have seeking approval for today is Peaceful Villa, sponsored by Home Forward. Again, it's a preservation project that includes a range of unit sizes, including just notably large family units, 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms. The project size, total project is over $100 million and seeking conduit bonds of over 56 million for this project. They previously received GHAP and preservation dollars, and this is part of a RAD transaction that Home Forward is entered into. The project includes as a range of spaces for tenants, including a clubhouse, kids play area, computer labs, and outdoor patio space. This project is slated to close in this month also. Next slide. And Home Forward has entered into a partnership with ERCO, who they've done previous work together before, and provides a range of culturally specific services to the units, to the folks who'll be living in these units. And Home Forward and their general contractor know what's expected of them as far as the MWSB participation for the region, and OACS will be monitoring their progress closely. With that, I open up for questions and ask that you consider the motion.
All right, council, questions, discussion? Councilmember Harris.
Thanks, Chair Hall, and thanks for the overview for these projects. They all seem very positive and exciting. I just had one clarification question for the Barber Apartments. And apologies if you already went over this when you're presenting, but in this summary, it says 60% MFI, and then in the project details, it says 45% and 30%, I believe. Can you clarify which one it is?
So because of the project-based assistance, they're gonna be serving those households with 35 those 30% units are going to be those units are going to have folks are going to be have project-based assistance, so those households will be have project-based assistance, but the unit restrictions that OACS will be restricting to will be at a 60% AMI target. So what you essentially have is because of because of the project-based assistance, we'll have, they'll be able to serve those lower targets.
Got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying. I think that's really encouraging to hear, especially in the Portland metro market, that is definitely needed. So thank you.
Okay, any more questions or feedback from council at this time? Then are we ready for a motion on Barber Apartments?
I move to approve the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Can we have the roll call now, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. And for clarification, this is the vote for all three of the properties.
Okay.
Councilmember Farrell,
Yes. Excuse me, yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
Yes.
Councilmember Willard.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right. We've got a few more items from affordable rental housing, and the next is a conduit charge recommendation. And let's hear about that.
Right?
Hall, if I may, just very
Oh,
quickly, Natasha, sorry to intervene, my apologies. Before we specifically or formally rather close out, I just want to make note for the person that made public comment, regardless of its specific relevance to the motions. I do want to just make note that we will follow up with the person. So we will make sure that we have contact information and follow up. So there was an abrupt transition there, and I wanted to make sure that that didn't get lost in the swing of the agenda. So we will follow up with the person and then make sure that council has an update as well. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
That's great.
Great. Thank you. And let's see. So next up, we have conduit charges. And so I think I will start out putting a little bit of context to that. So last month we were here and we, finalized, adopted the framework that will allow our tax credits and the qualified allocation plan to be finalized and updated, and the ORCA to be finalized to incorporate those tax credits. The piece that we didn't finalize last month, wanting to make sure that we had enough time and space to do the analysis needed, was to bring back the finalized recommendations around the conduit charges. And we have Kelso here to speak to that, both the comments received as well as how these are being finalized and recommendations today. And then I will follow through in this presentation to the next agenda item, which is really the update on that overall qualified allocation plan, finalizing some of those policy aspects within the framework Housing Stability Council adopted. And we'll talk a little bit about ORCA readiness and all of those components. But first up is the conduit charges. And I think as Council will, talk to the conduit charges. This is the mechanism through which we issue our private activity bonds, which then create and generate the 4% tax credit. So it's, a process where we are the conduit to get those private activity bond resources and funds into projects through a third-party lender. And so it is not a simple process. And it definitely is something that we have done more and more and expanded the work over the last several years. And so the time to update these charges in conjunction with our opening of these tax credit resources through the ORCA. And so with that, Kelso, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Natasha. Good morning, Chair Hall, Housing Stability Council members, and Director Bell. I'm Kelso Bersunas, the Financial Strategy Analyst here at OHCS. And so I'm here to bring back our conduit bond charge recommendation for approval. Just to start with a little bit of recap from our December 2024 meeting when we first introduced these updates. These, as Natasha said, these are the charges for our conduit bonds, also known as our pass-through revenue bonds. And they are the structure that OHCS currently uses on our multifamily side in 4% LIHTC deals. OHCS is acting as the conduit to get the money from the bond investors to the bank, which then loans money to the project and collects payments. The proposal that you see here today remains the same as the one that you saw in December, and there are three main parts. One is the issuance charge. This is 1.5% charged up front, and we are removing the prior cap of $150,000. Two is the drawdown charge, removing the drawdown charge. And three is the annual charge on balance, and we are adding an annual charge on the outstanding balance of the full bond. Next slide. So OHCS solicited feedback on the proposal in December 2024 in tandem with the qualified allocation plan with a 30-day public comment period. And we really saw four main conduit charge related themes. So the first one is concern related to impacts on project feasibility, given the increased costs of issuance, both with the removal of the issuance charge cap and the new annual charge. And OHCS understands that this charge will impact projects financially and sometimes might require more subsidy. Because OHCS provides tax credits, bonds, and subsidy, we are able to look more holistically at all funding sources going to a project. Also, as of June 2024, costs associated with conduit bond issuance are now allowed to generate eligible basis for LIHTC, so for the computation of the tax credits. And this will help offset some of the increase in charges. And this change happened from a 2024 ruling from the US tax court. And before this, costs associated with bond issuance were not allowed to generate eligible basis. And then the last thing I'll say on this one is just a reminder that the updated charges, if approved, will impact projects submitting funding applications after this meeting, and so not projects already in the funded production pipeline. The second theme was questions related to comparability of our recommended charges with other issuers in the market. And OHCS analyzed data from a variety of peer HFAs, and our proposal is in line with what other issuers charge. We also saw some states that went even higher. We saw higher issuance charges, higher annual charges, or separate and additional charges for bond counsel and financial advisor costs. And then I think importantly, as I said earlier, and as you all know, OHCS differs from many other states in that it is a one-stop shop that offers many types of funding, including tax credits, bonds, and subsidies. And so in other states, sponsors apply to several different organizations for funding, each with their own charges and processes. The third theme was need for clarification about what is meant by the annual charge on balance. This is a new charge for the agency and for our sponsors, and it is an annual charge on the outstanding or drawn balance of the total bond that continues yearly until the bond is fully paid off. And then the last thing we saw was request for clarification regarding allowances for related party deals. And these are deals where the bondholder and the LIHTC investor are the same entity or the same bank. OHS will continue to allow related party deals, understanding that it's often efficient for sponsors to only work with one entity. It might be helpful to know this isn't a super common structure that we see. There were only a few deals in 2024 that did have this structure. But we will work with our bond counsel and our financial advisors to maximize the income earned wherever possible, but we will not be able to collect our full charge on these related party deals due to US Treasury program investment rules. And then the rules basically say the tax law allows the department to earn no more than a 1.5% difference between the mortgage yield for the project and the bond yield. So 1.5% is what is allowed for non-related party deals. And then for related party deals, tax law limits this difference or spread to 1/8%. So it is significantly lower. Other states ban related parties for some of these issues that cause agencies to forego significant income and fees, but we heard during public comment that this option is important and will continue to allow it in this proposal. And with that, I'll pass it back to Natasha. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kelso. And so we have a motion in the Housing Stability Council packet on page 23. And of course, welcome any questions, and Kelso will support any answering of technical questions around this in particular. I appreciate all of the work, and we'll just also echo appreciation for all of the public comment that was engaged in both the qualified allocation plan, ORCA, and conduit charges. So yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Just one question in regard to the proposed changes. Have you done an analysis of the additional cost that would represent on the project? Just because that will have to be covered by some other funding entity, and so that's the question.
Yeah, so I will kick it off, Kelso, and maybe you can help chime in. So yes, we have absolutely looked at the bond issuance costs in all of the analysis, looking at what was previously in place, what would be in place in other states, and then what the impacts would be with the updated charge. And so I think generally there's a bunch of those different levers in the consideration. And first, of course, the reality that the increased charges can be have a tax credit implication generated to support that. So it also brings in more tax credit equity, but acknowledging in the scheme of the system that will put pressure or require resource investment through subsidy. And as the subsidy funder for a lot of the projects, it does put a pressure on this on their other paired resources. But Kelso, do you have any other thoughts related to that analysis that you would like to share?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it. We've definitely done a lot of analysis on how this could impact the charges that we're receiving. But I think in terms of project specific, that we'll have to see as it comes through the ORCA how each specific project will be impacted.
And our overall read is that it doesn't make projects infeasible, because we are providing gap resources to be paired that support the total development budget, which includes any needed charges and resources from them.
Any further questions, comments, discussion from the council? Okay, hearing none, would someone be willing to make the motion to approve the February 2025 conduit bond change recommendation for Affordable Rental Housing Division conduit bond issuance? That's a mouthful.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mary. Somebody make a second, please.
Second.
All right. Can we have the roll call now, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
Yes.
Councilmember Willard.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think, Chair Hall, I can just slide right into the next topic here, which is on the agenda as a verbal update. So bringing forward this update on our qualified allocation plan. Again, last month we adopted here with Housing Stability Council the overall framework for how we were going to implement a bunch of updates to be able to offer our tax credit, both 4% and 9% low-income housing tax credit. It's into the ORCA this year. We are actively working to finalize all of those documents and anticipate in our planning by the end of this month to be able to do the full launch, which is both have that finalized qualified allocation plan published, put on the website and shared, as well as getting the work when we've been actively working with the governor's office to ensure that we can finalize that qualified allocation plan to be able to offer resources this month. And so that is our aim here. And so quickly moving down, we do have in terms of both 9% resources and 4% resources that we are able to offer in this calendar year. We had not been able to, we didn't have those resources to offer last year, which was where we emphasized focus on standing up the structure of the ORCA. And so this is now really finalizing the ORCA implementation to have all resources actively deployed and really get the really more solid operations with that, knowing that we'll have resources and pathways for all types of projects and best fits. So one of the things that I had committed to last month when we were here, because we had formalized and finalized the framework, but not the qualified allocation plan document itself, was to continue to bring back some of the more detailed refinements and feedback through the public comment process. And so I think in terms of what those look like, we have a few flagged and highlighted here. Again, we'll be publishing the red line QAP within the next week or two as we get that finalized and signed. I think we have heard from stakeholders' interest in not just the finalized document, but the red line from the draft they had previously reviewed. So we'll be doing that. We will also have the detailed a spreadsheet of all of the comments and how we are responding to them, and have they addressed any change, or do we have other context for that? So that will be a deep body of work that we will be sharing and have publicly available. And so I think there were some of these shifts that we've made. Minimum requirements for tax credits. There was we had drafted into our updated qualified allocation plan some structure around the tax credit equity pay-in schedule, meaning when you are when you have a tax credit investor, how much of the tax credit investor resources are coming into a project as it follows through construction. So, and right now we don't have that structure in our QAP. We tried to put that in. There was some consternation and concern around that. So we have removed that, and we will continue to engage around that, knowing that a best practice would be to have, if it's 50% built, you should having 50% of your money in as a general rule of thumb. But I understand that those have, more rippling implications. So want to make sure that we are working in consult both with our development community and also with our tax credit investor community as we navigate forward and consider that type of strategy in the future. We got some, feedback around having additional definition and clarity around material change. We do have explainers for each of those topic areas in both the ORCA. I think there's an ORCA and the QAP. So we have not added additional language to that at this point, but we'll continue to build out our FAQs and really understand where we have some, where there are needs to qualify. Also don't want to box us into a corner where we can't potentially unpack all of the kind of thousands of scenarios that could be that we see come through as a change to the project. So we're trying to hang to some really the strong points of that in terms of, development team, what are you doing? What is a material change about the population served or others as kind of boundaries for that, but we'll continue to engage with developers, but have not added additional detail at this point in time. Regarding the 9% tax credits, I'll read all of the list here, but I think there was some concern. We had referenced the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis and the housing production strategies. And so we have updated that to focus on the city where the project is being built. That needs to show that they have a need for the level of housing related to the AMI being served in the proposed project. That's something that as the ONA and the Housing Accountability Production Office continues to do their work, we can continue to refine. there was some expression of interest in increasing the percentage of resources that are that need to be deployed to nonprofit organizations. That requirement is 10%. We have not updated that at this point in time. We have in our overall ORCA related to GAP subsidy, have our set aside, the 25% set aside for culturally specific organizations and nonprofit development in rural communities, which is some additional emphasis on nonprofit partnerships, but chose to not make a big pivot in that related to the 9% credits. At this point in time, generally, we well exceed that 10% threshold. And so we'll kind of reflect on that as we bring forward future revisions as we get additional legislative investments. There was, feedback on the tiebreakers that we had proposed. As you may remember, the updated structure for the 9% tax credits will rely on some really strong criteria for focusing eligibility to access 9% tax credits. And if there are more applications that are eligible for resources within that evaluation than we have resources for, we would use a series of tiebreakers. And so one of those tiebreakers is related to policy aligned housing, and we referenced the co-location of early learning centers. And we heard, strong voices from rural communities saying co-location of centers isn't necessarily something that works in our communities and rural areas. And I think what we needed to do was revise the language and strategy around that. We have launched and invested state resources into our CARE effort, which is focused on the co-location of housing and supports for families and accessing childcare and early learning opportunities. And part of that process had been doing really comprehensive research through a third-party study to identify what are some of the strategies that can work across the state. And our actual definition of early learning, of ECE, as we call it in our administrative rules, includes other types of delivery mechanisms like in-home childcare that are better fits in rural communities. So instead of using that abbreviated word, we have added the full reference to that administrative rule, which includes a much larger menu of options that works better in rural communities. And then again, identifying definition for also in that policy enriched is a PSH, where they're focusing on providing permanent supportive housing to address chronic homelessness. So added some numbers to what does that mean to us. Being universal or inclusive design was part of that initial recommendation. And I will appreciate Councilmember Harris for really engaging with us to think about what does that mean and how do we make that operational. I think one of the things that we identified was the need to really be clear and explicit around that, and really have translated that at this point. And I think we need to have this as an ongoing body of conversation and work again as we move forward, but are really focusing on enhanced accessibility, making sure that the units and the work is more explicitly accessible to all to populations, including those that are aging in place and others. And so trying to add a little bit, a lot more specificity to that. So we have that created and drafted, and I think we'll want to continue to evaluate. And then further down the tiebreaker list, there is the idea of that we have, our partners and want to prioritize partnership with our participating jurisdictions across the state, who also receive federal resources through the home funds to be able to invest in community housing projects. And so have identified the dollars that means to be able to ensure that priority comes through. And then I think, otherwise, again, lots of just clarifications throughout in response to those public comments. Change. And so the other thing that we, as we are rounding up that qualified allocation plan and seeking to put out resources, one of the things that we had also adopted last month with that framework was refining the way that we are allocating resources to be a lot more specific. I think as we launched the ORCA, this was their put in, we committed to transparency around what resources do we have. We created some dashboards with information on what resources we had. And while I think, in our previous form and function of application processes, we absolutely attributed dollars to NOFAs, but then really focused on those in isolation. And the ORCA brings all resources together. And so we have, refined our ability to have real specificity around how those resources look. And so have drafted a more complex table of reference of resources that are available that will have to put out. This is the draft as of today. We will publish it regularly at a cadence to be able to have available monthly. And there will be times when things flex and change. If, some modest resources are returned, they'll be added, or, to be able to put and program in, but effectively adding a lot more specificity and clarity around the resources that we are deploying, specific to be leveraged with 4% tax credits that are eligible to go towards gap only projects. And then also to add other emphasis on the places where we have dedicated resources to serve populations, like our GHAP resources that are dedicated to veterans, and really highlighting that a little bit more strongly externally so that there's better understanding about where our resources are. And as we look to adding in our tax credits for 2025, we also adopted that framework last month for the regions and the focus for all of that. So you'll see in the middle there, the credits of the 9% low-income housing tax credits that will be offered, and then our private activity bond resources that we have offered. And again, when we've also incorporated and formalized partnership with the housing authorities of Oregon to ensure that where they have projects that can use private activity bonds to be able to fund projects without corresponding state resources, we have that clear and we are able to plan forward regarding all of those. And then I wanted to just take a minute here to just talk about readiness. And I think this is a topic that is coming up in a lot of spaces. And I know that we've talked a little bit about this last month as well, probably almost every month, to be honest. But I think really wanting to make, again, I think at this point in time, we're doing the piece of fully launching the ORCA. We have had tremendous numbers of projects moving through the ORCA, pursuing resources that don't require paired tax credits. And we aren't really have all of the resources and pathways for projects until we have tax credits as part of that picture. But as we went to build our application process, one of the things that was one of our top objective as we talked to Housing and Stability Council was making sure that where projects can move fast, we can move fast. Where we give resources to projects, that we had in place parameters to require that they move forward on a reasonable timeline. And I think this was, had some elements of that in NOFAs, but very little accountability and very little ability to hold to standard around that. So really shifting that. We also heard at the time very strongly that that organizations needed to have early understanding and confidence that the resources were there to support their project's development, and that they would not be able to wait until they were 6 months from closing to be able to get any commitment of resources from the state. And so what we set up in our process is the ORCA. So we have projects that are coming in and they are evaluated. Projects should come in when they are ready. They know that they can prioritize the project, that they will continue to move it forward. And once a project has a reservation of resource coming out of their impact assessment, where we look really deeply on the policy areas and higher level on the financial, is that they have only 6 months to move through the financial review process. They don't need to take 6 months. They could be sharing that information with us on the first day they have that reservation, and we would be evaluating it and moving them forward on that time. And I think there has, and I think and so what we see now, and we see that there have been modest progress of, we have organizations that are projects that we gave reservations to 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and some of those are still sitting in that financial review process. And we are communicating with those affirmatively. We are talking with them, making sure that they understand that they are not able to take more than 6 months in that process and retain their reservation of resources. So if they fail to proceed in that time frame, we will pull resources back, and they will need to go back in line to be able to receive resources for those projects again. I think we also know that and I'm sure many of you here in your communities or among developers, that there are the projects that are indicating, I am ready to start building tomorrow if I had resources today, and that this isn't that the parameters that the ORCA has put in place is different than choosing a project that can close tomorrow over one that can close in 6 months, but that we have put those accountability and measures in place. When we are thinking about adding the tax credits, however, our private activity bond resources are time sensitive. So we have right now, as we look at that funding calendar, we have 2025, we have 230 $230 million in private activity bonds that we would be able to deploy to support affordable rental housing development in 2025. So that is a time sensitive resource. If we don't fully utilize it, we will be able to access it again and get through a private activity bond committee. We would make that request for carry forward, where we then would have a few more years to spend it, but we are considering those time sensitive. So when we are opening the ORCA for the 4% process, we are specifically focusing on first putting forward recommendations to projects that are able to demonstrate readiness to close in 2025. Those projects will not have 6 months to go through their process, because they need to close, and they will need to demonstrate that they can close well within 2025. And we'll have all of that detail and specifics in the application around those measures. I think we also got a lot of really helpful public comment related to readiness and what are the types of measures that we should be looking for in there. But again, really needing to have a place where we can hold projects accountable. I think candidly, before we can get the culture shift to happen, we need to practice holding the accountability to get us there. And so I think I expect that as we are launching later this month, we will begin seeing those first reservations to come through with the remaining paired gap resources that we have. And that those will be projects that will be sprinting through our production process, and that we will be having a very close eye on, and will not allow 6 months in those phases as we have done with the gap only resources. And as we think about what future edits and revisions may be needed to our whole system of ORCA, once it is fully in place and we can see how that is performing, those are all active conversations that we should all engage in to make sure that we're doing the work both to support organizations that need more time to be able to get their projects together, but also need to have understanding that the resources will be there for them in order for them to invest in doing that work. And also have ways and pathways for projects that can go right now to be able to do so. But we're kind of critically examining and analyzing that as we move forward. And so I think I will kind of sit on that. I don't know, Director Bell, if there were other thoughts you have as you think around readiness and projects that are moving through ORCA.
No, I appreciate that. I'm curious to hear from the council where there might be either additional areas of clarity that might be needed, feedback just from a local perspective that you might be hearing. And I think there are, broadly speaking, we recognize that as we are looking to boost affordable housing, that we are needing to make shifts, and part of it are process shifts and culture shifts. And it is we are abundantly responsible for ensuring that we are being as specific and clear around terms so that people feel certainty, not only just in terms of resources, but words as well. So that's the reason that we're re-bringing this, and probably going to continue to bring it, along with the learnings and feedback that we're getting from all of the partners that we rely on across the state to advance progress. So maybe I'll pause for just a moment, Natasha, before we round out and keep moving to see what might be on the minds of council at this point.
Okay, Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I'm just still excited about the project shifts and how we continue to improve the process. I'm just curious if we've had any additional comments from the community about how it's working for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our seat and in public comment, we got a lot of public comment. I think there is, you know, a shared measure. We have a really strong pipeline of projects that have been reviewed through impact assessment and are on a wait list for resources. And so I think that understanding and visibility that there are projects that could be built if they had resources is just highlighting and emphasizing the need for resources within there. There's a lot of interest in that, and for those projects that are moving forward and finding the ability to talk to our technical advisor team to receive support and consultation on applications. I think that is something that I continue to hear a lot of really gratitude and appreciation for that element of partnership. And I think you know, I think reflects our intention around wanting to be collaborative partners to support development while we also hold the accountability. And I think it's the accountability piece that we're getting to practice. And we have a really strong need for resources to support our production pipeline. So are excited to be looking forward into this legislative session for ability to provide additional resources to projects.
Yeah, Councilmember Rogers,
there's
so many areas of feedback that we've gotten along the way, and I won't seek to try to summarize them all. I think, at least from my seat right now, I think one of the several takeaway points are we are seeing a lot of our development partners rise to the occasion. There are a lot of projects that could be ready to go if we had more funding. And I don't think that's a particular shock to folks, but we have a line of projects that are ready to go, which is, and again, I won't get on my soapbox this morning, but I'll maybe save that for another one, but which is why both on the federal side, we need to continue to have reliability and increase in resources particularly on the tax credit side. But also it is also reaffirming the importance of the cacophony of line items within the governor's recommended budget, because we've got so many projects that are ready to go and folks that are doing the important work to make this shift to help boost supply. And even as they are making that shift, ultimately it comes down to whether there's going to be money to provide the certainty, and we are still in a mismatch of within that reality.
Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I wanted to ask about the preservation strategy, and what has been brought up to my attention is that on the guidelines, developers who have purchased expiring rent assistance projects, and they don't qualify for the preservation if they already are in ownership, even though they may have purchased it 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Is that correct? Because that was a key strategy in Portland for the preservation of many projects, was acquire the property first, and then we'll figure out how we fund the improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I think Councilmember Mena, I don't know. I think that there's so many different circumstances and strategies there. So I think it's probably not possible to answer generically. I think you're right that strategies to do bridge acquisitions to be able to do the long-term preservation is intentional and should be supported through our process. And so I think that there are places where that works and there isn't. I think part of what we haven't had are sufficient resources within our preservation funds to do acquisition. And I think tax credits is an opportunity there. And so if you navigated to purchase and acquire that project in a way where you could be layering in tax credit resources to do the full resyndication, then that would be an opportunity now. But where we only had modest legislative investment to support preservation in this biennia, I think we had a total of 50 million, and so there's just insufficient resources to support a 20, 30, $40 million acquisition of projects. But I think the smaller projects, and I think tax credits is the missing piece in that landscape, and also in all of that. And I think we have the, a robust preservation framework guiding all of those resources, and also understand and see how significant the body of projects are that are going to be expiring soon, but also or being sold with the eventuality that that is there. And so the idea that there's this missing piece of resources to support those acquisitions, and I think that's where that is part of our preservation ask for resources, which is reflected in the governor's budget related to that. So I think it is largely around resources, and certainly if there are projects or circumstances going on, I would encourage folks to reach out to our technical advisor team to be able to bring all the preservation connected folks. We have across our division, we have our push program or push regulations around the expiring projects and risk. We have a preservation seat in the kind of the framework planning area. And, so I think there's a great network of folks to be able to bring into those to be able to see the full picture of it. But I think project specific questions, I would reflect or encourage getting insight on the specific circumstance of the project.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. I completely understand about the limited resources for acquisition. I was referring more in terms of if the developer is able to acquire the property on their own with the perspective of we're going to preserve this project, and hopefully in 2-3 years, we're able to get preservation funds to be able to do the renovations that have to happen.
Yeah.
And that I don't know, I don't recall seeing any information about that when I read but I wanted to make sure that that is an option because that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can bring follow-up on that. And I think the Orchard Park project that you approved earlier this morning is one case of that, where we had provided the gap financing a year, 2 years ago, with the idea that they would come back for tax credits when we both had them available, but then also when they had understood the full scope of rehab needs related to the project. So I think we have practiced that. So I think we can continue, we can come back to speak more to the framework and resource and strategies around that at this point in time in a future meeting.
That's my only point, that if a nonprofit has acquired a property for the purpose of preserving it, and without using state funds on the acquisition, that does not preclude them from being able to, 3 years on the road, able to reach out to the state to get preservation funds to be able to improve the property or do the maintenance that is required.
Yes, I think it is. Though it also, but it depends. Are you acquiring the project? Was it actually expiring? Is it actually prioritized in preference? But I think it is also, again, it's case specific. So if there's specific projects you are hearing about that have something that you want information around, I would, I think please let us know. And I think generally, yes, if a project is prioritized for resources because it is at risk of loss and it is expiring, we would be able to prioritize it through the framework as much as we have resources allow. If it is a project that is expiring in 30 years, we don't have acquisition resources to support that. It should still, and I think we've also, I'm trying to emphasize to everyone, no matter what your project need is, please do submit it into our intake process so it is on our radar. And that is how a technical advisor will be understand that it is there and can reach out to the project or the sponsor, I think. And so again, putting it on the radar, but there are all sorts of different strategies in terms of owners wanting to sell or divest portfolios, which put different types of emphasis on those acquisition resources. And I think we're all, curious around all of the different ways that we can support it, and also know that we need to prioritize the resources we have to those that are at imminent risk of loss in the majority of circumstances.
So just a quick follow-up question, just to make sure, on when you're talking about the expiring and what is the right time frame as to which the project may expire on this preservation component. Are we talking about definitely 30 years? There's no reason to acquire the property. It's locked out for 30 years. 20 years, I would also question it's locked out for, is it 10 years? Is it 5 years? What is it? Do we have an idea?
Yeah, the framework has timeline parameters within it, and I think I will need to bring back the preservation folks to make sure I'm speaking to the most specifically accurate, but I think the push regulations have their parameters, and it's generally, I think, within 3 years. I think we tend to have a 5 to 7 year parameter around that as we look at it, but I think we can come back maybe with an update on our preservation framework and kind of have more detailed questions around that as well.
Thank you, Natasha. I appreciate your work.
All right, then, our next step.
I think that was an informational share, and so I think was the goal, and the last agenda item on in our Housing Stability Council packet was really a memo update only on the launch of our moderate income revolving loan program, which will also be launching this month, which is very exciting to be able to engage in that work to support cities who are aiming to invest their resources through this program into housing investments. So we'll surely be providing updates as we launch that and see how cities choose to participate.
Wonderful. I'm really excited about that, and I'm sure a lot of other people are as well. So we are at the point in the agenda where we're scheduled to take a 15-minute break. It is 10:22. Let's try to reconvene at 10:35, everybody, please. Until then, we're in recess. Second half. At this time, 10:35 a.m., I would like to reconvene the February meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. And first up, Homeownership Division, and Director Giscombe, are you ready to present?
Yes.
Okay, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Hall, esteemed members of Council, and Director Bell. My name is Keeble Giscombe, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Homeownership. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'd like to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to this Council for its approval and unwavering support of the First Home program that we discussed in 2024 in November. Your commitment has been instrumental in expanding homeownership opportunities for our community. And again, today we return before this Council to follow up on a critical discussion initiated by Councilmember Menia regarding potential loan forgiveness. Following our November meeting, we engaged with our financial advisor. Within our agency, we work with our lending program and our debt management staff to work diligently to create the biggest impact for Oregonians who are mostly underrepresented to explore viable solution. We're pleased today to present our recommendation for forgiveness and insights here. In addition to this discussion, I'm excited to share the remarkable progress we have made since the First Home program was approved in November. To date, we have successfully onboarded 14 fully implemented lending partners offering products to prospective homeowners. This marks a significant improvement from our previous legacy program, which only had 9 lenders. Even more encouraging, our production has more than doubled in the past year and tripled since 2022. And we're currently experiencing our highest reservation levels since 2019. Currently, we have 153 loans reservation, a testament to the impact and reach of this initiative. Our program and debt management staff have worked really hard to make sure this is something that we could work on and move forward to. I will not take away any more highlight that will further detailed by our Assistant Director, Mr. Scott Shaw. And we also have Mr. Harris is here as well for support. Thank you so much for your time, and I'd like to pass this on to Mr. Shaw.
Chair Hall, members of the council, Director Bell. Well, still morning. Keep wishing for afternoon. Sorry about that. But so this is our follow-up. You guys, we really appreciate that faith that you had in us and allowed us to implement the first home product in November. It has been a resounding success, just like Keeble said, and forgive me for not even mentioning that I've got Matthew Harris, our Assistant Director of Capital Markets with us. I get so excited about the product that, we're just kind of leading in with all of the good and exciting things that are happening. But we can get into the technicals, but more importantly, I think is that we've been able to help a lot of people. We look to helping more. And Councilmember Mena, you had challenged us and said, "Hey, can't we forgive?" And we're like, "Well, we don't really know. Let's check." And it took a lot of back and forth, to be honest with you, as Matthew can attest, of just trying to find the absolute maximum forgiveness we can have in terms with a balance of the program and the product. We've included a memo for everybody to read, but I think I'd rather just kind of discuss openly what we're seeing here. But the advice came back is that what we could do, especially for our more underserved borrowers who are getting our focused demographics DPA, those borrowers receive a 5% DPA, and that DPA was to be due on sale. And one of the pieces of feedback is if those are the most underrepresented, can't we help them better, right? And as we spoke with our financial advisors, we came up with a solution, and that solution is to take our standard 4% DPA even and offer a forgiveness for it, so it doesn't last forever in perpetuity. If you own the house for 60 years, you still got to pay it back. What we're going to do is we're going to match that to the terms, or at least that's what we advise with your approval. That the DPA that is the standard DPA at the end of that loan term of 30 years for the first mortgage, that DPA is in fact forgiven. And then for borrowers who have the focused demographic DPA, which is our 5% DPA, that DPA is forgiven at the end of 15 years. Are there any questions?
Chair Hall, it looks like I'm seeing 2 hands up if we can proceed. All right, Councilmember Rogers and then Councilmember Mena.
Yeah, sorry. I was having trouble unmuting for some reason.
No worries, I got you.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you, Chair Hall and Director Bell. So I appreciate the forgiveness aspect and the time period. I'm just curious if this is eliminating the due on sale clause, or is it in addition to? Just wanted clarity for that.
Oh, great question. So this is going to replace the due on sale DPA. So our DPA for borrowers that have an AMI or area median income of 80% or below, that DPA does become forgivable at the end of 30 years for the 4% DPA, and the focus 5% DPA, or focus demographic 5% DPA, it is forgiven at the end of 15 years, and we'll implement that as quickly as we can once we get through legal.
So what happens if somebody sells before it expires?
It does become repayable at that time. So you do have to get through the term.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right, Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I just want to thank the team for the additional work. I think that as we look at who we are working for and who we represent, I want to make sure that they are not left behind. And I think providing this opportunity to be able to have a forgiveness, I think it's great, especially for the communities that, again, that we want to ensure that get the assistance. So thank you so much for doing all the additional work. I know it's taken a lot of time, and I'm sure some resources, but I think we have a better product at the end. Thank you.
Okay, anything else from the council? Questions or feedback? All right then. Any further discussion before we move to the vote? Okay,
Just great job.
yeah. Okay, can we get a motion now, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
Yes.
Councilmember Willard.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, great job, team. And now we move on to our final section of the agenda, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Director Bunch, are you presenting?
Yes, I am gonna, let me get my screen set up here and
Sure.
make sure you all can see. Can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, good morning. Let me get myself together here. Really great to be with you all today. Let me get this out of the way here. Awesome. Okay, we're ready to go. Thank you, Chair Hall. Really great to see you all this morning. Chair Hall, Director Bell, council members, members of the public. My name is Chelsea Bunch. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here at the agency. Always great to be with you. And since it is the first time that I have had the chance to be with you all in 2025, also just want to say Happy New Year. So we want to spend a little bit of time today. We just have a couple of briefings we want to share. We want to spend some time elevating some of the really exciting efforts that are being led out of our office in an effort to continue to center equity in the work that our agency stewards. We're going to start off with sharing the agency's work to build up and implement our language access work. And we'll end with sharing highlights on our ongoing work to deeply engage with tribal partners. To start us off, we're going to start with language access, and I want to just ground us a little bit together. So I want to share some language that I learned from an interpreter in a webinar that I just recently participated in yesterday. And they shared with participants that language justice is the practice of ensuring that everyone has the ability to speak and to listen in the language of their heart. And that really stuck with me. The Community Language Cooperative, which is a cooperative that's born from community, notes that language justice is more than just interpretation and translation. It is an intentional practice that values interpretation and translation as critical tools for opening communication and empowering all voices. And so I just want to ground us in that. With that, I am really, really thrilled to introduce and welcome our newest team member in our office, Magda Bejarano, who is the Language Services Policy Advisor for our agency. And Magda has been in our office since November. And I'm just really thrilled to have Magda on the team. She brings a really rich knowledge, expertise, and experience. And I'm really grateful for her leadership that she's already shown in this work. And so I'm going to let you hear from the expert. And so Magda, take it away. And you tell me when you want me to advance slides. I got you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea, and good morning, everyone. My name is Magda Bejarano, like Chelsea said, and I use she, her pronouns. Really glad to be here today, to have joined the EDI office for our agency, and to have the opportunity to provide an update on the implementation of the resources that our agency has received to expand language access and have our communications be more inclusive. So I think we can go to the next slide. Chelsea, this presentation will go quickly, I think so. We'll start just with a little background as a way to frame the work and really celebrate the opportunity to do this. Our agency received an investment of $1.7 million to stand up the agency's language access program during this biennium. And this funding was approved as part of a larger statewide policy package to support the network of housing service providers in the state, including our agency, just keeping accessibility and communications in the front end of the request. So that's kind of where we are starting. The challenges, I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. To implement these resources and be able to do the work, our agency included the inclusive communications and language access component as one of the 4 focus areas for the agency's equity, diversity, and inclusion plan. At the time of this request, our agency identified several challenges, one of them being the community not being fully aware of the programs and services and investments that were available, and another one being community members facing language barriers to access the information about these programs. The overall goal for our office through this request was to be able to better identify and understand those barriers and to invest in language services that allows us to remove those barriers and ultimately create bridges of communication with the community and make access to our programs meaningful and effective. So I think if you want to go to the next slide, Chelsea. And this is just kind of a reminder or some facts that I think inform our work. It's not a full reflection of the diversity, the linguistic diversity in our state, but the people who live, love, laugh, worship, work in Oregon speak many different languages. So about 15% of Oregonians speak a language other than English at home. And about 13% of this community self-identify as having limited English proficiency. So they self-identify as not being able to speak, read, or understand English very well. This is data from the American Community Survey. And I also wanted to show just the top 20 languages that are spoken in our state. The list is a lot longer. There's a lot more languages, but I put the top 20 just to create some awareness of how our state sounds and who we are in terms of linguistic diversity. And just a quick caveat, because this data doesn't, again, reflect all the diversity of our state. We are learning through different partners in the community that there are an additional about 26 indigenous languages spoken in our state, a lot of them by the agricultural workers who, I think that the data I have is that about 40% of the agricultural workers identify as indigenous, and many of them speak primarily indigenous languages from Mexico and Central America. So this would be about 30,000 Oregonians that speak languages that are not captured in this data. Okay, so I think we can go to the next slide, and just to be back to the update on our work. The infusion of resources that our agency received for this biennium has allowed us to begin, again, addressing the needs of the community in terms of language barriers and reviewing our internal processes and practices to respond and to be more responsive to the community. Our equity division, our equity, diversity, and inclusion plan follows a structure of having a focus area, strategies, and key results. And like you see there, some of the strategies that our agency identified for this biennium included hiring and onboarding the primary staff to facilitate this work. That's me. I'm really happy to be here. And then the focus of our strategies is to work with our staff, experts, and community to identify the need and to understand how this would affect various departments and programs in our agency, and to outline specific changes and actions that can be taken so that when a community member with language barriers comes to our office, calls our line, goes to our website, that we are able to meet them and respond to them in a way that doesn't pose a barrier, but creates a communication line. And the key results of this work for us, as we imagined, include first an updated language access plan, which is really important. A language access plan is really a document that outlines how our organization will provide language assistance services to the community. And it really works as a blueprint for our effective communication with community members whose primary language is not English and face barriers. So this is really our roadmap. We are starting to work on that. And we also hope to have adequate service contracts in place, which we have already started working on that. I'll share more about that. And then our goal too is that our staff internally feels empowered with information, tools, and support, so that they know how to respond and that they feel comfortable either responding or seeking assistance when they need to communicate with these community members. So if we can go to the next slide. Our process started, or I guess we've been working on this since the beginning of the biennium, but in September of last year, we started a partnership with Portland State University, with the Population Research Center, and also with the Center for Public Services. These two research groups have been really, really helpful in revisiting all the different elements of a language access plan, which are kind of shown here in this slide. We are really glad that they have been able to inform and help us access better data than we had before as an agency, and tabulate this data in a way that is meaningful for us, but will also be meaningful for our partners who are serving the community directly. We are breaking census data by language and county, so I think that will be really, really helpful. This is kind of a sneak peek of the process that we hope to, or we will finish by June of this year at the end of the biennium. But our new language access plan will incorporate the 4-factor analysis that is recommended by the Department of Justice and HAD. It includes just looking at the number or proportion of people with limited English proficiency in our community that we can serve. We are going to look at how often they come into contact with our information, with our agency. We are going to try to understand the nature and importance of the information we provide, what is essential for the community to know so that we can prioritize our communications, translations, and we're going to do an analysis, or we'll be thinking about the resources and assets that our agency has to be able to implement this work sustainably. And other elements of this plan include ensuring that we have good quality interpretation and translation services, that we review our delivery service process, that we have a clear way to notify the community that language services are available to them at no cost upon request. That is what we also need to do to comply with federal requirements related to civil rights and non-discrimination based on national origin, heritage, language. So we'll really keep that also in mind as we go through the process. We'll do work to, again, have tools, information to support our staff, and engage with the stakeholders and community. Some of the things that we are in the midst of doing that I I also want to celebrate, I think, are really exciting. We're working with Portland State University to facilitate conversations with our staff and the community. They have been able to facilitate some focus groups with our staff, and we are gearing up to have 3 focus groups with the community in March. We want to hear from partners that have a contractual relationship with OHCS, so that because they are the entry door to our services in many cases. And we also want to hear from other community organizations that are culturally specific or work in the housing space and can further inform our process. So we'll have these focus groups scheduled for March. We hope to learn a lot about their experience working with the community, their strategies as well, and what they may need to be able to facilitate and expand this work. And also, I just want to share that we, I think it was this month, which just started, maybe last month, the end of last month, a few weeks ago, we entered into a new contract for interpretation services. And this is great because with this new contract, our agency is able to provide interpretation services consistently and quickly upon request. We had different practice where we had kind of contract services as needed, which didn't always allow us to be on time or just do the best service for the community. So this is, I think, a really great step. And along with that, we developed a process with our procurement department, accounts payable, communications team that allows us to track the request for services transparently and in an organized way. It allows us to be really accountable to our providers and also to understand our costs. So we're really happy that we are working or that we had the opportunity to work with those different teams to create a new process. Along with that, we are creating a buyer's guide, which will be a tool for our staff to help them navigate that process. We identified points of contacts in each division of our agency. Those points of contacts will be further trained in the process and in language access so that they can be a connection with the division, the programs, and support their agency. So lots of moving pieces. I think we have, what I found really exciting is that we have found that our staff and partners are really eager to dig into this, to collaborate. They have, of course, a lot of ideas, but really have been really supportive in the process. So we are excited about this. We expect that through this process and as we move forward, we will see an increase in the use of translation and interpretation by our staff and hopefully requests from the community. And we think that will lead to really contributing to more access by community members who face barriers. I include myself. English is my second language, and I have used language assistance many times. I still do. I watch movies with subtitles. I ask my family to double check what I'm writing. And that allows me to function better in our community. So I hope that we can extend that to others and really contribute to removing barriers to access housing. Hey, I think that's it. And I think, Chelsea, the next slide just has my contact information, and it also has a new email box that we created for language access for the community to use to tell us about their need and experience. I am glad to expand or answer any questions that you may have before I go.
Oh, this is such important work, such important work. It touches every aspect of what we do, and I think it's wonderful. Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Magda and Chelsea, for your work. I think a lot of times people lose sight of language being a barrier and how, you know, people who don't speak English need housing and support and finding out how to get what they need. So I'm excited. I really appreciate the work and thank you for your leadership and the presentation today.
Great. Councilmember Meehan.
Well, there are many aspects of this council that I find very hard to understand in English, let alone trying to navigate in another language. And I just want to say that this is housing justice. So this is what this is the kind of work I really am excited about, because it's inclusive and it includes everybody in our community. So I'm very excited about hearing about this. I hope that you're in connection with IRCO, International Refugee Coalition Organization. I mean, those guys, they're champs over there, and very excited. I can't wait to spread the news that OHCS is doing this work, and really appreciate you doing that. And then I see the tribal stuff with the tribal dialects and things. That's just great. It's great work. So I really appreciate it. There's 116 languages spoken in the Gresham Barlow School District, just in our little piece of Gresham here. So that's quite a bit of folks to cover. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anything else from the council at this time? Again, thank you, and we'll move on to the Tribal Government to Government report.
Yes, thank you, Magda, and we'll welcome Tim on. And while we do that, let me get my screen reshared here. I'm getting there, y'all. There we go. Okay, now are y'all seeing that? Okay.
Yes.
All right, well, here we go. So next up, we want to take some time to share some of the work that we've been engaged in with our tribal partners, as well as highlights from our annual government to government report that's been referenced in your council packet. You'll note from the memo, each year in accordance with Senate Bill 770 and Oregon revised statutes, our agency submits a government to government report to the governor's office and to the Legislative Commission on Indian Services, LCIS, designed to share updates from previous plans, to provide a description of key agency services and investments. It's an opportunity for us to highlight tribal engagement activities and to share updated priorities. And so with that, I'm really excited to introduce and welcome Tim Maher-Macias, our tribal liaison. I really continue to be deeply grateful for Tim's leadership, and particularly the care with which he's been stewarding important relationships with tribal partners in the space, the ongoing space that he's created to engage with our tribal partners. So Tim, I will turn it to you to take it away. And you tell me when you want me to advance forward.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chelsea. Good morning, council. My name is Tim Maher-Macias. I use he, him pronouns. I'm here in the Eddy office where I act as our agency's tribal liaison. And yeah, I'm just going to provide kind of a briefing on our 2024 government to government report. So Chelsea, do you want to advance a slide? So I'll just provide like kind of a very brief summary and then kind of get a little bit into the weeds of some of this work. So first, I just want to say that OHCS kind of continues to grow and deepen our relationships with the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon. We've seen that in the work we've been able to do with them, and they're showing up and engaging and consulting with us. And so that's something I'm deeply appreciative of. We've continued to see the success of the BAFI NATO program, which is the By and For Initiative, Native American Tribes of Oregon. We have begun to see 2 tribes have begun construction of new homes using HDIP funding, the Home Ownership Development Incubator Program. We also have the Tribal Housing Grant Fund in the agency request budget, although at this time, obviously you heard from government relations that the governor has taken that up as one of her legislative priorities. We also saw tribes open up 2 new permanent supportive housing operations. Both Warm Springs and the Klamath Tribe had those 2 new developments open up in 2024. We also have 2 tribal projects in the Orca. So Chelsea, do you want to go to the next slide? So tribal engagement, I guess just oftentimes people hear about tribal engagement, and it's not really sure what that means all the time. And so as an agency, typically what that tribal engagement looks like is it's a lot of one-on-ones with tribal housing leaders, health and human services leaders, or members of tribal council. It is consultation with the tribes. I facilitate a monthly tribal housing work group wherein agency staff can get in front of tribal housing and health and human services directors to talk about programs and offerings and solicit consultation. We also have open office hours for BAFI-NATO to provide technical assistance if tribes want to update their budgets or their priorities. We have those monthly. And the other places that we kind of engage with are the LCIS cluster meetings. And so this is places where tribal leaders meet with agency staff to discuss programs, offerings, things coming down through their kind of engagement. And as a liaison, we attend two of those. We attend the economic development cluster meetings and the health and human services meetings. Just some other pieces. When we do direct allocations, it allows us to directly support tribal goals, their applications, and provide direct technical assistance. And we also offer technical assistance to the tribes upon their request to help ensure things are in compliance. Next up, thank you. So homeownership development. So in 2024, the Burns Paiute tribe provided its first issuance of down payment assistance and is working with second home buyer to get them ready to purchase, ready for purchase and closing. And they will fund a total of 4 home buyers through their recently constructed homes on Burns Paiute Reservation land. The Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw spent $75,000 on needed home repairs for tribal members. The Coquille Indian Housing Authority launched a first-time home buyers assistance program in 2024, and it's supporting 3 tribal households with down payment assistance. And the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde are building 6 homes within a larger housing development called Tipso-Eli, I think. This is part of phase 1 of a development, which is going to build 20 new single-family homes for tribal members within a larger project. So 3 homes have sold and 3 others have buyers who are waiting to close on escrow. And Nixiawi Community Financial Services and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation is about 20% through building 21 2- and 3-bedroom homes. And just to kind of give an example of what consultation can do, when initially the HDIP program, we went to the tribes to discuss this kind of sticks and bricks development. We heard feedback that some of the tribes weren't in a position where they were ready to develop single family homes, but they would like assistance for they would like some down payment assistance for their members. And so the HDIP, the home ownership team made the call to say, okay, if you apply, we're going to guarantee you some down payment assistance for your members. So that's just a great example of where we've seen as an agency reflect those desires and feedback from tribal partners. So do you want to go to the next page, Chelsea? Excellent. So permanent supportive housing I talked about. So there's currently last year 2 permanent supportive housing opened up. The first one is down in Chiloquin at Malia's Cafe, which is an old motel and cafe. That was opened up and is going to be, it kind of blends 2 of our program funds, which is Project Turnkey 2.0 and BAFI-NATO, to create 26 permanent supportive housing units for tribal elders. I think through that development, it reduced the wait list for housing, I think around 10% for the Klamath tribe. So that was a huge undertaking for them. You can see the grand opening. The second one was a Warm Springs finished a 10-unit permanent supportive housing project. That was kicked off in 2019 from the Permanent Supportive Housing Institute. And due to COVID and a number of issues, there was some delays and stops and starts, but that just opened. And that's another program, another unit that BAFI-NATO is being used to help support the efforts of that permanent supportive housing. So do you want to turn to the next slide? Excellent. So kind of talk again about ORCA. It's the Oregon Centralized Application. soft launched in 2024 through NOFA process. And at this time, I believe there are 2 tribes, both the Klamath and Umatilla, who have projects who are making their way through that. So really excited to see that further develop, and for those tribes to kind of fully utilize and develop those housing projects they have. So next slide. Project Turnkey 2.0, as you're all aware, this was allocated in 2022 short session. Additional funds were allocated to fund Project Turnkey 2.0. This is a program that bought and converted old hotels, motels into permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, homeless shelters. And the program was administered by Oregon Community Foundation. So in 2022, they requested the help with soliciting some tribal applications. So we were able to help facilitate 2 successful applications that were approved and moved forward in 2023. And then you can see how those have come out. First is the 4.3 million resulted in 36 additional shelter and transitional housing units that came online in 2024. That includes the Klamath Tribes, Malitas, PSH, which I showed before, and the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon was able to deploy their Liberty Street complex. So, you know, it's always great to, I think, hear about the release of these funds, but then to actually see the outcome is great. So we can turn to the next slide. And if I'm going too fast, my apologies. I'm a little bit nervous. So BAFI-NATO is the other Buy-in For Initiative Native American Tribes of Oregon. This was a decision by the agency in 2021, end of 2021, to directly allocate homeless services funding to the tribes. Prior to this, tribes used to have to go through the community action agencies to get some access to these funds. And just kind of very high level, 1,300 members or individuals have received or are receiving services, including 781 who are enrolled in a housing or homeless prevention program. 212 people receive one-time services. 347 enrolled people have exited either a housing or homeless prevention program. Additionally, funding has supported the development of 2 emergency shelter sites and 3 transitional housing sites on tribal lands. So BAFI-NATO kind of has been a really big success in how we worked with the tribes, how we build trust with the tribes, and how we really work closely with them on everything from the funding formula, the allocation formula, program guidance, and kind of the eligibilities they want to do with that. So we can go to the next slide. So that all kinds of led us to this next, which is the development of the Tribal Housing Grant Fund. So after we saw the success of the kind of the negotiation over BAFI-NATO, the question was, we heard from our tribal partners, is what's next, right? BAFI-NATO is great, but we need more flexibility. We need dedicated ongoing funding. And so in 2023, over the course of the year, our agency met with representatives from the 9 tribes, and every month we would have them meet with policy experts from within our agency representing every division. So home ownership, housing stabilization, affordable rental housing, but we also had them meet with government relations team, our procurement team, our data team, to kind of better understand where are the barriers, where is the need, and how do we better work with the tribes in a true government to government sense. The tribal representatives included health and human services directors, housing directors, tribal council members, and ultimately we put together a recommendation, facilitated this recommendation from the tribes for a flexible, ongoing, dedicated funding source so tribes can address housing needs. It was very much how can the tribes address their needs as they arise within the housing spectrum of the work we do, versus do they want to access funds that we have kind of throughout the year that aren't necessarily matched with their needs. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll provide kind of, this is just like a development timeline of like when did this all start? What was kind of the kickoff with Baffy or with the Baffy NATO? And so you can see in December 2021, this decision to directly allocate funds was made. We began consultation in January of 22 with the tribes. In December of 2022, those grants were finalized. They went through procurement, they went through the DOJ, they went through all that. So then and those then went out to the tribes. And then starting in January 2023, we began to have that consultation engagement with tribes around a funding recommendation. December 23, we provided those to agency leadership. January of 24, the Tribal Housing Grant Fund POP policy option package was created. In August, it went into the agency request budget. In December, it made it into the governor's recommended budget. And then earlier in January, it was made a legislative priority by Governor Kotek. So really excited. I think this represents, the Tribal Housing Grant Fund represents kind of a first in the nation approach to how we work with our tribal partners in a way that is, I think, uplifts sovereignty and meets the critical housing needs that they all face. So next slide. So looking ahead to 2025, part of these reports is like, what are we doing in 2025? So the biggest thing is, should the Tribal Housing Grant Fund get signed into law, there's going to be a lot of consultation with the tribes. We're going to be doing rulemaking with them, putting together allocation formulas, eligibilities. They will have been involved from the start to finish of this process. The other thing is we're going to continue to attend tribal conferences and events from NAIHC, NWIHA, ATNI to kind of further develop and grow our relationships and be a resource and go in the places where we need to be listening. And finally, I think it's going to be strengthening our relationships with other tribal liaisons and tribal directors from other state agencies with a focus on looking for collaborative opportunities. In the past few years, we've worked with like Oregon Health Authority, the Department of Revenue, the Business Oregon on kind of where we have overlap or where we can work together to be more effective and be better resources for our tribal partners. So a lot to look forward to this year. That's all I've got. Thank you for letting me ramble and speak so much and maybe speak a little too quickly, but are there any questions?
Yeah, that was a great presentation. Council, questions, please. Comments? Feedback? Good thoughts? All right, Councilmember Meehan.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Tim, you didn't speak too fast. I think you did a great job. And another one of these, another great implementation of programming that is inclusive to the tribal community. That's awesome. I see that Councilmember Deanforum, she's not here, but she's part of the board and part of the strategy for that. So that's great. I'm really glad to see that because I know that this is the work that she's doing, and so I really appreciate the hard work and being inclusive. And I see you guys got a lot done in the last just like 4 years. So continue on.
Great. Anything else from the council? Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you, Chair Hall. And yes, great presentation. Again, this is continuing to do the work, which is what is important, and like to see the progress that we're making. So march on. Thank you.
Great. Anything else from the council? Okay. Anything left on our agenda? I don't believe so.
That concludes the agenda for today's council meeting.
All right, then before I sign off and wish everybody well and say see you next month, I just hope you'll all join me in thinking a bit about our beloved Oregon. 1 week from today, on the 14th, it's Oregon's birthday. admitted to the Union on that date in 1859. And okay, I'll just be very personal and say, right now, more than ever, I'm happy and proud to be an Oregonian. Thank you all, and we are adjourned.